So leash reactivity, dog aggression, paying attention, and then you did some training before, positive reinforcement.
Positive reinforcement, obedience training, and that was just your basic, sit, lie down,
Sure.
stuff like that.
Sure. So go ahead and fill me in on Scooby here.
He was a stray.
Okay.
That we took in. What was it?
Someone left him at a dog park. A couple girls
Oh well.
saw it go down. They scooped him up, put him on Facebook. We said, we brought our dog, a chocolate lab, to sniff him out. Passed the sniff test. Decided to bring him home because pretty much our chocolate lab approved.
Sure. Chocolate lab approved. I like it.
And we've had him for about a year and a half now.
Okay. And then when
He
did
was
the
about 7 months when we got him. So
Okay, so 2 years
I
about
don't know
now.
what his background was or anything like that.
Okay. And then with the behavior stuff, was that something you saw immediately, or was that something that started to happen over the course of time?
Well, a heel and any form of loose leash walking was an absolute no-go from day one.
Uh-huh.
He's got some husky in him.
Yeah, a little bit of husky in him. We did a DNA test, so he's just
Polar.
go, 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 and will not pay attention. The second you outside, it's like you don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's pretty normal.
We can proof all we want in the house, but the second we introduce some level of distraction, it's game over.
Sure. Okay. And what about like the leash reactivity and stuff? When did that start happening?
Well, our other dog is a sweetheart, but she's pretty leash reactive.
Okay.
And sometimes we don't have time to walk them separately. They do daycare twice a week. The other 3 days, I'm walking them, and I'm coming home and eating lunch and taking them out. I don't have time to do
Yeah.
separate walks.
Yeah.
So if our lab sees a dog, she lashes out, and that kind of triggers him. I think he's usually the second one to react.
Okay,
Yeah.
so he's following.
He's following.
He's
I gotcha.
following. But lately, he has had a little bit more dog aggression, especially at.
Daycare.
He's had a couple daycare incidents, but normally he's really good at daycare. We go to a huge, like a 7-acre field out in the suburbs.
Oh.
At Miller Meadow.
Okay, I
It's
think I'm
off of
familiar.
First Ave.
Uh-huh.
And he's fine there because he's got all of the space, but we can't do any sort of like confined kind of, city dog park.
Yeah.
Because if somebody gets too close, he doesn't even do like a simple correction, he just goes after them.
Oh, okay.
That's
the beginning.
relatively new.
That's
I mean,
relatively
like in the last 4 months, we
Yeah.
just stopped going to dog parks because he was the asshole.
Okay. So previously able to go to the dog park.
Yeah, he was left at a dog park.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but routine dog park trips.
Did he ever have a negative interaction? Like, did a dog ever correct him, or was there a scuffle?
Nothing like significant that like stands out in memory.
Okay. And you said this started happening about
You know
4
what?
months ago.
We found a dog park that was pretty remote and secluded, and it was almost like a private dog park.
For an apartment building, but it actually ended up being a public dog park. So hardly anybody used it
So we were there solo,
for a long time.
and then other dogs would trickle in. It's public, and that's when I started noticing
That-
the reaction. And then we tried a different dog park, and
Yeah.
Carried
I
over.
wonder if that is more of a resource guarding.
Yeah. That's what I would think. Like,
Because he can be that way he's like that with our other dog, with Bones.
okay.
He only wants the toy that she's playing with rather than the toy that he has,
Uh-huh.
even if they both have the exact same thing.
Yeah.
us like calling Gracie up on the couch when he's already on the couch. He's like, get the hell away
Yeah.
from my parents.
Yeah.
Has-
And then there's also, we initially started feeding them separately, and he's really good about it now, where he waits in his bed until she is done with her meal. Like, we've trained that.
Okay.
But if it was anybody else watching them, I would tell them to like feed him in his crate separately.
Yeah.
Grace.
So going back to that kind of isolated dog park. So you found this dog park. It's just you guys. You go there for a while. Then people start to find out about it, and then more and more dogs start to come, and then you start to see him become defensive.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So to me, it sounds like territorial-ish. and then maybe just carry it over when you went to the back to the
There were
usual.
dogs there, he busts through the gate like a bull in a china shop. And when dogs are trying to come in, he's right there.
Yeah, he doesn't like being, you know, when you do the double gate at the dog park?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and then there's like the first initial ambush.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it when dogs just
Come in.
come right up in his face.
Yeah,
You know?
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm gonna have you do here is take your leash and clip it to his flat collar.
Okay.
And then what you're gonna do is, have you ever pulled up and pushed down to make him sit? I'm gonna have you do that, but you're not gonna tell him sit, and you're gonna just repeat it over and over again. Yeah, just like that. Excellent, and then you're gonna relax, okay? And every time he stands up, you're just gonna repeat that process, but don't tell him sit, okay? Anything else about Scooby?
Snuggle dog. Do I do the same thing?
If he lays down, you're okay. It's only if he stands up.
Okay. Recently, when we picked him up from daycare, the receptionist was like, I spent some time with Scooby on the floor today. She's like, it's so impressive to watch him how he breaks up other dogs who are scuffling. Like, they'll be getting into it, and he'll just walk right through them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, he thinks he's the policeman.
No, he's a moderator.
So, I don't know if that's worth anything, but
Sure.
It just a tidbit. I don't know.
Sure. No, I mean, that's actually, how would you say, I find it helpful information just because he's asserting himself, right? He's establishing a boundary, if you will, right? Which is kind of good and not good. But if you take it as he's breaking up these scuffles and asserting himself, he's technically making a rule or disagreeing with something, right? But that can also carry into life as well. Oh, if this dog gets too close to me, I'm going to establish myself. Does that make
When
sense?
the other dogs don't know what the rules are.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that's how dogs do things. That's why, so when you guys came in, the barking that you heard is actually our neighbor. They house the canine units that are like on the trains and stuff, and they're leasing our backspace. You can hear them doing work on their roof or whatever. So they're leasing our backspace. All that barking is actually their kennel. My kennel is quiet. We get the occasional bark or whatever, right? And we very rarely, if ever, have scuffles because we address all that stuff. Because I don't ever want the dogs to think that they're in charge, because then one dog. So I've come into homes where one dog killed another dog, okay? Because they were letting the dogs handle it, and finally one dog decides, you know what, I'll just take you out, right? Because dogs don't have, murder or kill as a concept. Does that make sense? Like humans do. Obviously, as humans, like that would be bad. Dogs don't have that concept. So I've come in where one dog killed the other dog over something, and it sucks, but that's the reality of animals. So I go, well, if the humans are always asserting themselves, that's not a possibility. Does that make sense? So here, most daycares, they don't do that. They just let the dogs be dogs or whatever. But I hear, oh yeah, he'll go and break up scuffles. I go, okay, so he's taking charge there. He's making or asserting a rule. This also carries into just his regular life as well. So like if you're at the dog park, and let's say you're the first.
He's the dominant one all the time.
Right.
All the time.
He's asserting himself, but then that starts to lead to other issues, okay? Right now with what you're doing is I'm actually having you assert yourself, right? When you're using your food, a couple things. With food, it can stimulate the brain, right? He's already stimulated, like you mentioned earlier. He comes into a new environment, he's already overstimulated, right? So I'm already adding a stimulation on top of a stimulation. And you're going into obedience mode. But we're not in obedience mode, we're in what I would call behavior mode, right? We need him to calm down. And with what you have, so just so you're aware, harnesses actually can provoke and exacerbate reactivity, okay? Have you guys ever heard of opposition reflex?
Kind of like,
A leader? Like, is that?
no, it's like, isn't that where you have,
Yep.
like he just feels like he's being pulled back and therefore
Oh.
it exacerbates the
Yes.
behavior?
Yes.
Yeah.
They want to go against pressure,
Right.
okay? And then when you sit him, don't pet him either, okay? And I'll explain all this stuff. So opposition reflex is the instinct to go against pressure, okay? And it creates frustration. So like, if you imagine, if you ever seen like on a TV show or a movie where they're trying to hold someone back from something,
Yeah.
and they're fighting,
Yeah.
that's opposition reflex. Okay.
And he's a husky, so
Yeah, that instinct to pull, exactly. So this is a very common thing that we see with puppies, is that people usually put their puppies on harnesses because they don't want to put pressure on the trachea. Makes sense. But what happens is we have a perfectly social puppy that wants to say hi to everybody and everything. And they're constantly pulling the puppy away from these things, right? So then we start to create frustration because the puppy goes, well, I want to go and interact, but I can't, right? It's constant opposition reflex. And eventually, frustration can become agitation, which can become aggression. So sometimes people are inevitably or unknowingly creating an aggressive dog through this. I used to do protection training many years ago, where we would train a dog to be aggressive on command, right? Kind of like the canine protection dogs and all that stuff. And we would use harnesses because we wanted to provoke and create, you're doing a good job, to create the frustration. But then we would reward the frustration and then we would harness it and then control it and have it on a cue, right? And we did that through harnesses. So harnesses give you the least amount of control, but they also can provoke behaviors, okay? Because your dog has this constant frustration. So when you clip it to the flat collar here, we're removing pressure from the chest, and you have more control here. And the reason why I'm not having you reward or pet is when you touch your dog or you give your dog any reinforcer, you want to think you're reinforcing what's happening at that moment. Okay, now you technically have two things happening. You had him sitting, but then he was, right? He's anxious. So when you're touching him, you're probably thinking, I'm rewarding the fact that he's sitting, but I go, you're rewarding the instability. You should feel that way right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
When you're just asserting yourself, you're not telling your dog to sit, you're telling your dog to relax. That's why I said don't say sit. You're just doing this. You're putting him into a sitting position, and then he went to lay down, and then is this okay? I said, that's okay, because that's relaxation. Your dog has overstimulation issues, okay? That's why he keeps getting up. Overstimulation is the brain's inability to turn off, okay, on its own. So he's so used to go, and now you're telling him stop, calm, no. But his brain is so used to moving as it settles, 1, 2, 3 minutes, okay, I gotta do something. And now you're confronting him. So the anxiety comes up. He's like, but I gotta do something, right? But I just go, you're doing good. This is just a cycle. So eventually you keep doing this. By the end of the consultation, he might chill for 10 to 15 minutes finally, because you just you're not letting the brain move forward. You're disrupting it, right? And this is just a Band-Aid. This is just what we have, okay? But is that making sense?
Oh, yeah.
So what can happen is overstimulation is the dog's already over threshold to a degree in terms of stress, okay? So when you go out into the real world, you got a lot of stimuli, right? You got sound, sense, people, dogs, trains, cars, right? All that stuff, especially in Chicago, right? Is you got energy all over the place. So then he just goes into this different mode. And now he's out in the world already over that threshold. And if you add in another stressor, like a dog getting too close or what have you, he's going to go over threshold.
Yeah, he's got an inability to deal with it.
Correct. So when we bring a dog, we always want to get passiveness in the real world. Yep. And if you shorten your leash, you see how you're going like this? Yeah. If you choke up, it'll make it easier to just stop him right away. Yep. And then just rotate him over to your side here. Yep. I'm gonna bring him over, and then just like that. Excellent. Very good. Okay. And now, yeah, and then scoot him over. Good job. There you go. And then relax right there. Good. And then just relax. Good. Okay. Yeah, he's unable to deal with it because he's just constantly on edge. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're doing good. This is all normal. Okay. Question on any of that stuff?
So, what kind of setup should we have for the leash?
Well, right now with what you have is fine. If you put them on just your flat collar, because that's a snap buckle, the snap buckle for one can break, or two, they loosen over time and they slip over the head.
Yeah.
So, you know, we'll do the consult.
Like harnesses?
Yeah, but right now with what you have, you know, it's either do we have like get a new collar that fits him correctly. A martingale's fine, but I definitely would move away from the harness for sure. Okay. Martingale, doesn't provide any benefit other than it's removing the opposition reflex,
Yeah.
right? But your dog can still pull, obviously. That's where training comes into play and all that stuff. Now, if you move forward with training, then it really doesn't matter. Like, you'd move past the harness anyways, but it doesn't matter what you walk your dog on because your dog's going to be trained, right? But if it's like, okay, well, let's say you don't do training, I would still say go to a martingale at minimum and remove the harness, but you're still going to have the issue. It's just not going to be as exacerbated.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Other questions?
You also have a Springer collar as well.
Oh, then use your Herm Springer if you got a prong collar.
Yeah.
Do you know what size it is?
It fits the chocolate lab, so relatively close.
Okay.
Relatively close to him.
'Cause he's probably
Obviously, I
gonna-
could remove a link or add a link if I needed to.
Yeah. He's probably going to be on a 3mm. If you have a 3.3, I'd recommend.
I can tell you actually.
Yeah. If you have a 3.3, it's probably too big. Those are usually for like the big Mastiff dogs.
Yeah. No,
His,
it's not that big.
it would be the 3mm. But yeah, your Herm Springer collar is way better than even the martingale. Okay.
What about the gentle leaders?
The gentle leader, we use it for like that puppy that walked out right now. Good job. Is trained on the gentle leader because it's under 6 months. It does give you control over the face and the body. It does remove opposition reflex. Good job. The reason why I lean towards the prong collar is because it's meant to mimic a dog bite. You're giving him more of what he needs, right? Which is dogs are physical creatures. They nip and bite each other. Right now, with what we have, you're able to get him to settle for a bit, and then throughout the consult, we might just wear him out where he just gives in. But a tool like a prong collar, because it's that biting pressure, just makes it that much more effective because it's something that he understands. Does that make sense? Because dogs bite each other. Like this here is a dog bite. I don't know if you can see that. That's 10 stitches, okay? That's a dog that didn't want to go in a kennel. That's all it is. He's not aggressive. He still comes for daycare and boarding and all that stuff. This happened in October, November of 2019. He had never been in the kennel before, and he just panicked, and I was the thing leading him into the kennel, and that's what happened. Never an issue since, never an issue prior. He's a big doofus. He's a Great Dane. But when I told the owners, I'm like, your dog's not aggressive, he just panicked, and that was his form of defense, is he used his teeth, right? So the Herm Springer collar allows you.
3.25.
So that's he's on the 3. He should be on a 3mm.
Okay.
Yeah. They're not. I think like $25.
Yeah.
On Amazon, but 3mm would be what I would recommend.
Gracie.
Yeah, if your lab is the same size as him, then most likely same collar. So is this all making sense here? Okay. So now that you're confronting him, the stress yawn and the whining, that's the anxiety, of course, because you're not allowing him to do what he wants to do. But the more you let him do what he wants to do, the more that behavior becomes reinforced. Okay, it's just how that stuff works. Okay. So before booking this, did you research how we train and the methods that we use?
Yes.
Okay, so we use prong and e-collar. Are you guys familiar with e-collar at all?
E-collar? Like
Yeah.
Electric?
Yes. Do you know what it is?
I'm assuming it's a,
Yeah.
So it's not a shock, which is what most people would think.
Like your phone vibrating.
So the cell phone vibration, yes, there's a setting. It's a vibrational setting, it's just like your cell phone. The stim function, or what would be the electronic component of it, would be, have you guys ever been to a chiropractor or a physical therapist?
Yeah.
Have you ever had TENS therapy?
Yes.
That's an e-collar.
Yep.
Okay, it's a muscle stimulator.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so people tend to think electrocution or shock, because out in the dog training world, there's a lot of drama between positive-only trainers and trainers like myself. I use everything from positive reinforcement to positive punishment, whereas in positive-only, there's even called like force-free, right?
Yeah.
Where they don't do anything. You can't even say no.
You just ignore the behavior until
It's that.
they do what you want, but that doesn't change.
No,
With
that doesn't
him,
work.
It hasn't changed anything.
It doesn't, more often than not, it doesn't work because by ignoring, you're technically allowing, and by allowing, you're reinforcing, right? So like with that puppy right now, just completed a board train like a week ago, and the puppy's being a puppy and it's nipping at their feet. And they're like, we've been ignoring the puppy, but it's not helping. I go, yes, because if that puppy did that to another dog, what do you think that dog would do? And they're like, well, the dog would probably nip at the puppy. I'm like, correct. And that's what you're not doing. Because we're humans, like we don't bite our dogs, right? I was like, but we have to find out some way to replicate that in order to deter the behavior. So consequences are meant to stop and or deter things. So your reinforcer, like when we go back to the touch earlier, right? Now you might be going, I want to reinforce the sitting or I want to soothe my dog. console my dog because they're anxious. But your dog doesn't understand the consolation part. I do, because I'm a human. The dog just thinks that is telling me I should feel this way right now. Does that make sense? So all I did was we removed the treat, we removed the words, we removed the petting, and just asserting yourself.
And he just gets, he feels the pressure.
Pressure. So with service dogs and like with children on the autistic spectrum, something that's soothing for them is pressure. So some dogs are trained to sit on their laps to calm them down if they ever have a fit. Okay, weighted blankets are a thing now for people with like anxiety because the weighted blanket helps them relax and sleep better, right? Technically, this is pressure, right? So pressure can help calm the brain down if you know how to do it correctly, right? So it's pressure when we need them to do something, pressure off once he complies, right? E-collar is another form of pressure. The ones that we use have 127 levels or respective levels of pressure, 0 to 127 in increments of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 127, okay? So we can really fine tune it to the dog, the personality type, all that stuff, the situation, are they stressed, are they not stressed, all that stuff, right? And there's different levels. There's collars meant for little teacup dogs. There's e-collars meant for like little 20-pound dogs, for medium-sized dogs, and Rotties. There's varying degrees of output, okay? But it's not electrocution, it's simply a muscle stimulator. The way I like to explain it is a bite on a button, okay? Dogs nip and bite each other. That's just how they communicate. He's giving you a few examples, right? Like if they get too close, he might maybe put the threat of consequence, right? Is when we condition the collar, I want the dog to understand it like a dog bite. So that like right now, let's say he was conditioned and he was for whatever reason stressed and I tapped him, he would create that. Because I said, don't be stressed. Don't be anxious. Now, as a human, it does not make sense that you could use a punisher to get a dog to relax. But because dogs don't think that way. You look at it as, that's a mean thing. That's bad. The dog doesn't. The dog goes, oh, you're disagreeing with that behavior? I'm going to relax then. Does that make sense? If I say you can't be anxious, you can't be overstimulated, you can't be defensive or whatever, the brain goes, then what can I be? Relaxed. Does that make sense? But it's the way that we condition it. There's a lot of trainers that use e-collars, a lot of trainers that use it incorrectly, in my opinion. I get a lot of dogs that were conditioned incorrectly, and I have to recondition them. So, for example, I had a client whose dog completed a 2-week board and train. A year later, they showed up with the dog on the collar. The dog was stressed out, okay? And I was like, when did you complete your program? They're like, oh, it was about a year ago. I'm like, your dog should not be that. They're like, every time we put the collar on, that's why we don't like to use it because he looks like this. And it looked terrible. And I'm like, I don't think your dog was conditioned correctly. And they're like, what makes you say that? I'm like, because it's been a year and your dog should already be over the stress of the collar. And your dog is not. That tells me your dog doesn't know why it's happening. So they did 3 classes with me. We did 1 class, and I said, rinse and repeat for 2 weeks, come back. And on the second class, the dog had the collar on, was completely passive. And they said, Jesse, this is crazy. How is it that our dog learned and calmed down in 2 weeks? I go, because your dog understands it now. Your dog had plenty of exposure of wearing it, experiencing it, but it did not understand it. Now that your dog understands it, you already did the exposure part. Now you just cleared up why it happens, why it turns on, why it turns off. The dog learns they can control it. So like, you guys ever get a red light ticket? Yep, right. I just got one like 2 weeks ago. Do you know how to avoid a red light ticket?
Stop.
Yeah, just stop, right? Yeah, like we understand that, right? So we know if I don't want to risk the red light ticket, I just don't run the red light, right? So if a human, like let's say you wake up and there's a ticket on your car, right? And you read the ticket, there's no explanation. How are you going to feel? Confused, right? Why did I get this ticket? And the next morning you wake up and there's another ticket, no explanation. More confused and probably a little bit pissed off. Yeah, exactly. And then day after day, that was that dog. The collar was turning on, the dog did not know why. The dog did not know how to prevent it, how to turn it off, what to do to change it. So once I fixed that, the dog goes, oh, I understand this now. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that's why when you get that red light ticket, you may not like it, but you go like, well, I fucking ran the red light, right? That's how that works. Yeah. So my job is to make sure that the dogs understand the collar correctly, and I like to explain it as a bite and a button because that's how dogs communicate with each other. And it's the best way to explain it, really. So physicality is healthy. We're taught that it's wrong, right, as humans. We're taught to not be defensive or aggressive and all that stuff. And I go, well, yeah, but what if I have to defend myself? If you tell me that I can't be aggressive to defend myself, and that's not, to me, being aggressive. That's just me protecting myself. Same thing for a dog. I've had clients whose dogs were charged by off-leash dogs, and their dog became aggressive. right? And then the owner thinks their dog has a problem. Like, no, they don't. They're protecting themselves.
Yeah.
Like, that's, to me, a valid response.
That is the, there was 2 specific incidents with our lab that have been charged while she was on the leash.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which were just very untrained German shepherds coming up to her,
Mm-hmm.
and she
In a hallway.
once in the
Around a
hallway
corner.
of an apartment building, and then the other time when I was out on a hike with friends where girl basically lost control of her leash, and the German shepherd came up and like started attacking her.
Yeah.
So that's where her like leash
Reactivity, yeah.
reactivity has stemmed from.
Yep.
And he didn't used to be that way, but seeing her, I think he's
Yeah.
just mimicking that behavior.
Correct. Because you said he's the one he triggers after.
Yes, he
That's-
doesn't bark first, she barks first.
Yeah.
And then because then she starts barking, he goes, well then, okay, we're all barking.
Yes. And you're correct, this does happen quite a bit because those 2 instances have created distrust. So now every dog is a threat, technically, right? Potentially to your chocolate, especially if it looks like a German Shepherd, right? I'm sure, because it happened twice with German Shepherds.
Yeah.
And you can fix that. But this is a very common thing, right? So dogs are physical creatures. So when we use the remote collar, we can shape obedience and we can also correct behavior, okay? Because people are always amazed how quick it progresses. And it goes, because we're teaching in the way that they understand and communicate
Well, I think he's given up
through physicality, for now.
for now.
Is through physicality. So people tend to think of these tools as punishers, like your prong collar, for example, because it looks like a medieval torture device, but it's meant to mimic a dog bite. Is people just think like, right, just go and like just yanking and stuff, and that's technically an approach. It's the old school, what we call yank and crank. But what we do is condition pressure first. So if you had a prong collar on him and you pulled up, you create biting pressure, and you're guiding him. The moment he sits down, what happens?
The pressure
Releases. You see that? So that's the communication, and that's what the e-collar does as well, but it does it at the press of a button at varying intensities. The problem with the prong collar that some people tend to come across is that, remember, dogs bite each other. Even if you did correct the dog very firmly on the prong collar, you can only correct to a certain degree before you have a limitation, right? With the remote collar, again, we have 127 variances of intensity. So I can bypass how much biting pressure a prong collar can do with the remote collar because it's a muscle stimulator. Does that make sense? So I get dogs that were trained on prong collar and they're like, Jesse, our dog just completely ignores it no matter what we do. I go, yeah. I was like, because dogs bite each other. What they can do with their teeth is far greater than what we can do with the prong collar. The e-collar allows us the closest to get to a bite as possible without actually biting the dog, which is why it's one of the most effective, well, not one of the most, it is the most effective tool in my opinion. So every dog that trains with us is gonna be on an e-collar. Okay, I get clients that come in, they're like, Jesse, we don't wanna use e-collar, we wanna use food only. I go, I'm not gonna train your dog. I was like, because I already know what the limitation is. And my price point is what it is because I know what I can get done with the tool that I use. But if someone goes, I want to put a limitation on you, I go, well, then you're not going to get your money's worth, and then you're going to be looking at me like, you charge me $2,000 and my dog's still the same. I go, right. So I'm not going to train your dog, make it easy for you. There's people that will, not me, right? So I use remote collar because it is the best tool. It's easy to understand. It's very efficient. It's very effective. More often than not, between classes 1 and 2, we already get a change in behavior. Okay, your guy, I would say probably after the first class, a big chunk, like 80%, is probably going to be done. Okay, because this is a case that gradually happened over time, as opposed to it just was. Does that make sense? Like this is built over time. So it's not really like him being this way. It's just he was reinforced because it was allowed to happen, and his ego has grown. Right? So once you start to rein it in, all of a sudden all these behaviors start to go away because you're treating them as another dog would treat them. Like right now, that one little thing I had you do to that, right? And again,
What I want is like, oh, you can sit at a patio and have a beer, and he just lays there.
correct. And that's where like remote collar stuff comes into play because right now we have nothing here, right? At a restaurant or whatever, you're gonna have obviously stimuli and all that stuff. So that's where the tools come in because we have to account for the variables in the environment that we can't control. Okay, does that make sense? Questions so far? When it comes to how the process works, first thing we always teach is heel. Okay, one, because Most people walk their dogs 3 times a day, 7 days a week, right? Especially if you don't have access to a yard or anything. So that's 3 times a day, 7 days a week, you're gonna practice this exercise, okay? Leash pulling and leash reactivity also happen to be the most common behaviors we deal with as dog trainers. So heel helps address leash reactivity and leash pulling, okay? Also, e-collar is a stressor, okay? Walking helps alleviate stress. So as you're doing your training and you build stress, you're also burning off that stress. So heel, any trainer that knows what they're doing is gonna cover heel first, in my opinion, okay? You'd be surprised how many trainers don't cover heel and or teach it last. I go, why would I teach the thing that most people wanna, almost everybody wants to teach last? That's gonna be the first thing, right? But also, because now you have ritualistic structure, when you go on a walk now, I always say 80% work to 20% play. So if you walk your dog for an hour, 45 minutes or so would be in the heel exercise, 15 minutes or so would be broken up as you like, be a dog, right? Go sniff, exactly. So your dog becomes what you give. So if you're giving, do what you want, when you want, right? You get a dog that just does what they want. When you start to give direction and then permission to do what they want, you start to get that dog in response, right? It's like right now, with you asserting yourself, right? You're establishing a rule. Calm down, relax. Because of that, you're creating this. Your dog needs guidance. The issue is, and people want to give guidance, the problem is they don't like what they have to do sometimes to give that guidance, right? A lot of people don't like e-collar because of the impression or what they think it is. But once you start to understand, like I have 5 scars on my body. I got one here, I got, there used to be a 6-inch scar from a Rottweiler bite. I got a bite here from a 3-month-old blue heeler puppy that was severely aggressive even as a puppy. This bite here and another one on my leg, right? When you realize just like dogs and being physical creatures, and I never take it personally. I'm like, okay, like, you know, this dog bit me because I got too close to the owner. This dog bit me because I was freaked out about going in the kennel. This was during protection training. This was because I was pushing a dog back from exiting a door, right? Like you just start to realize like dogs don't care. It's the human emotion and what they put behind it and how we view these things that create this stigma. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But when you start to treat your dog as a dog and communicate with them as a dog would, now you start to get this in response, okay? So with having ritualistic structure, now you start to get this more consistently. Does that make sense? Question on any of that stuff?
I'm just happy how calm he is right now.
So in terms of like length of time and cost and everything, it really comes down to what you're trying to accomplish and how well trained of a dog do you want, okay? So with the stuff that you're describing, the only thing that's a variable is the dog park.
Yeah.
Okay, but just because we can't account for the personality types of the other dogs. You mentioned coming into the dog park, he doesn't like the charge. That's pretty common, right? Because he's walking, so humans greet face to face, hi, how are you? They don't. They greet nose to butt. So going into a dog park, you kind of remove that nose to butt, right? They all barge to the front. He's entering, he's got 5 noses facing him. That's very threatening. I mean, imagine if you walk into a room and there's just 5 people sitting, right? You're like, yo, what's going on, right? Give me some space. But you would have the ability to say that. Give me some space, right? He doesn't. The way he does it is, yeah, you see that? So the dog part is the greatest variable. But if you're using the dog park as a means of outletting energy.
No, I would rather get my own exercise and
Go
walk
for,
with him
sure.
and have a good dog on a leash so that it's mutually beneficial
Yes.
than use the dog park.
So walking your dog in a heel for me is more exercise than running around because it's not just physical, it's mental. Yeah. He has to focus on you. He has to ignore everything in the environment, right? Because in order for him to heel at your side, he has to pay attention. In my style of heel, it's very strict. If I take 5 steps, he takes 5 steps. I take 1 step, he takes 1 step. When I stop, he automatically sits. And I don't care what the environment is. Okay? I don't care if you're in the middle of a dog park. I want that level of focus. It sounds very complicated, but it's not. It's very simple. Okay? It's just a matter of applying the exercise and going to what he needs. Okay? So here's an example. I have a dog right now. They're going to take a break for the winter. We had 7 classes out of 9. Very anxious, similar personality type, a reactive dog, 20 pounds. Okay, little guy. We got a lot done. And on our last class, what they're struggling with is he's super vocal in the car, like he shrieks. And he's super vocal in their elevator. He also shrieks, okay? And because he's a little guy, the highest the owner has gone is 40 to 50 out of 127 on their collar. So I took the dog and because she corrected him at 25 actually in the last class, he was still anxious, and I said, let me see. I took the dog and I hiked it to like 80, and I tapped him once. He yipped, and immediately after, he rested for about 2 minutes. He did it again. I corrected him one more time, and for about 30 minutes, he just sat there. He was panting very heavily because he was still anxious, but he was no longer whining excessively. And she said, how did you do that? I said, I just corrected him at 80. She's like, 80? I go, yeah. I was like, because that's what his anxiety needed. But you're correcting him with what you're comfortable with, which is a very common thing, right? Because again, it's against the human brain. It's counterintuitive to think that something that we deem as bad would help the dog. But dogs don't view it that way. To him, it was just a very harsh bite to say, don't whine right now. Yeah. Okay? Now, the dog is still anxious because he's an anxious dog, but I was telling her that there's a difference between practicing anxiety and confronting or dealing with anxiety. Practicing is the instability, kind of what we saw earlier. The whining, that's practicing anxiety, that's being anxious. But when I corrected him at the 80 and I capped him and I said, nope, you're not going to do that anymore, because the anxiety has to go somewhere. But he's venting it now. He's dealing with it. And in time, it would just go away because he's learning being anxious doesn't get me anywhere. And then if anything, there's going to be a correction for it. Does that make sense? So then she's like, okay. She's like, she already had the idea that she needed to go higher, but she didn't want to screw the dog up. Yeah. Right? So that's why I did it for her so she could see it. I go, now that you've seen it, you've got a glimpse of it. But it's just a matter of, again, we don't like doing it. I don't want to have to remote a dog at 80, but I do it because I know I have to help the dog. Did you watch any of our training videos? Did you watch the one with Georgia by chance?
Not familiar.
There's one, it's on my YouTube channel. I think it's labeled like severe leash reactivity or something. It's a long video, it's like 45 minutes. One of the worst cases of reactivity I've had for 23. Again, another 20-pound dog. And when I saw her dog during the consult, I did not film it. But I was like, this is going to be one of those cases. So I told her, you want to get the high-powered collar, the one meant for a Rottweiler. Okay? And she just took it, and she's like, okay, Jesse. And she just followed my instruction. Good thing she did. So it took me to the 4th class before we finally resolved the reactivity. But we ended up having to go to 127 max power corrections for it. Classes 1, 2, 3, we're trying everything else first. Okay? And then she came back, she's like, Jesse, she's like, we're doing better, but it's still pretty difficult. And I go, okay, we've done all our homework now. Now we're going to go where we need to go. So we did 127. I said, go rinse and repeat for 2 weeks. She came back, reactivity was done. Okay? Because she was willing to go where I told her to go. And she followed my instruction and bought the highest output collar. Most people do the research. Oh, Jesse, but it says this collar is appropriate to my dog. I go, yes, for your dog's weight. But your dog is fucking crazy, and you want the high-powered collar, right? She followed my instruction. We had enough output, because it's not that's saying it's not about the dog and the fight, but the fight and the dog, right? Yeah. When you deal with dogs, yeah. When you work with dogs like I do, you like that saying is true 100%, right? People would go by her size. I go, no, go by the behavior. Okay, size does not matter.
It's the same regardless of whether that dog is this big or this big.
Right.
To them, if the fight behavior, it just feels like it's more lethal when they're this big. But
exactly.
The dog that's this big, it's
right.
the exact same.
Because I've done this for, this is as canine perspective 12 years, as a career really 14 years. I already knew. Like when I saw the dog in the consult, I already knew what was going to happen. But I had to work the owner through it. I had her work from. We don't start high. We go low, and then we work our way up until we end up where we end up. So for the human, they go, okay. We tried everything under the moon, under the sun, and nothing was working. But when I did 127, like Jesse said, all of a sudden I started making progress and seeing change, because that's what the dog needs, right? It's not what the human is comfortable with, but what the dog needs. So I always tell my clients, I can only take you as far as you're willing to go. I get some clients that go, I can't do it, Jesse. I go, then I can't help you, which is why I do it now. So part of the consult is to educate you what an e-collar is, but sometimes it's more difficult. I've had cases that were going to be super simple. Very difficult. I've had cases that are going to be very difficult. It was super simple, right? So I've just learned who knows what's going to happen, but if you're not willing to do what's necessary, if we end up at that extreme point, I may not be able to help you because you're your own limitation. Does that make sense? But I recommend watching that video. It's on my YouTube channel. Dog's name is Georgia. It's a more recent one too. I think within the past month I put it up. But I break it down. I use footage. And you see her, and you're like, wow, that dog is pretty crazy, okay?
It was a Rottweiler.
I'm sorry?
It was a Rottweiler.
No, it was a little like she looks like a miniature pinscher, but she's not. She's like a 20-pound dog. Okay, she's a little thing. But that was what she had a collar meant for a Rottweiler,
Yeah.
but she was only a 20-pound dog because her severity was so bad. So you see, because earlier, yep, you're doing good. You're like, oh, he finally relaxed. And I said, for now, right?
Until he
Start
decides.
moving around.
Yes,
Yeah.
because the brain,
It's time to do stuff.
yeah, but that was like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Whereas in the beginning, it was every minute.
Yeah.
You see that? So when we get regular structure, and this is without actual consequence, right? This is a Band-Aid for now,
Yeah.
okay? But when you start to put actual consequence and routine and all that stuff, discipline into the picture, you start to get this more consistently,
Want to try?
okay? Questions so far?
Not here.
So, yep. Good job. Yep. Good job. Yep. Good. So we have leash pulling, recall. I'm assuming is something you probably want to cover.
Yeah.
You said you want to go to restaurants with him?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not really going to factor in the reactivity stuff because I don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it's going to resolve itself. You're doing good with the training itself. Is there any other behavior that you're trying to address outside of that?
Leash reactivity.
Pulling.
Oh, resource guarding.
Yes.
Okay. So when you mentioned earlier, if he's on the couch and then your other dog comes,
Yeah.
I cannot make that happen. Okay. So there's things that we can do, but I can't, good job, I can't make him like the lab coming onto the couch. You're doing good. Yep.
Choke up on the leash.
So best way to explain this is, is there things that you guys don't like? That you just never liked, right? Yeah. Could anybody make you like those things? No, right? That would be a decision that you'd have to make, right? So like, I'm 37 now. When I was like 22 or whatever, I didn't like sushi. I thought it was gross. The thought of sushi, raw fish or whatever, right?
I hear that.
It's changed, trust me. A buddy of mine was like, hey, come with me to the sushi place. Try the Godzilla roll. It's cooked sushi, right? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So I went, I was like, sure, I'll give it a shot, whatever. I loved it, right? So at first I started with the cooked sushi. Now I eat nigiri, sashimi, uni, I love it, right? But I had to experience it and then decide for myself, I really do like this. And I changed my perception of that, right? So same thing for your dog. If he doesn't like the lab coming up, you can't make him like it, right? Now you could do like the treat stuff or whatever, right? To see if you create a positive association. But instinctually, if he just doesn't like it, he's most likely gonna always kind of guard that. Does that make sense? So, because I had another client that had this exact issue, not a client, he did a consult. He ended up not moving forward because he didn't like the answer I gave him. Because he kept wanting what he wanted. He's like, I want this dog to just be able to do these things, right? I want my other dog to hop on the couch, no problem. I said, I'm like, that's not a thing because I know sooner or later you're gonna either become too lenient or you're gonna slip up and there's gonna be a dog fight.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to prevent. He already had a couple on his hands because of this stuff. And he didn't like the answer, so he didn't move forward with the training. But I'm being realistic,
Yeah.
right? I don't wanna sell anything to you that I know that's probably not true.
It's not a game, it's not a deal breaker. I think one of the more things at home between the two dogs is he's a collar biter.
When they
And we've
fly.
seen twice where his teeth get stuck in her collar. Now you got a tangled dog, two
And then
tangled
they-
dogs.
And then
Yeah.
they scruff.
Yeah.
And we gotta so we've been taking the collars off. At
Yeah,
home.
that's your easiest way.
Yeah.
You can correct the collar biting. Like let's say you're in a yard or something and they're playing together and their collars are on. You can correct with the e-collar
Yeah.
to stop doing that. Inside the home, I would just go with removing them just to
Yeah.
prevent that. Because I've had someone tell me where their dog, it was at a dog park, their jaw got stuck and it was like a huge
Oh, yeah.
fucking thing. So yeah.
But
Then he started like pulling himself down, but like it was pulling her next, so she started yelping, and then because she was yelping, he's like, ah, and just.
Yeah, no,
So just
yeah.
take the collar off.
Yeah, that's your easiest remedy there. So how old's your lab?
She'll be 8. in
She'll be 8.
April.
Okay. Are you looking just to train this guy?
For now, at least.
Start, yeah.
Okay. So just so you're aware, as FYI for you, We don't charge per dog, okay? You pay for your program, and if I'm training 2 dogs or 5 dogs, I don't charge any difference. I just show up, okay? If you wanted to save yourself money in the long run, you can do both at the same time. What we do is we recommend that you extend the first 2 classes by half an hour, and it's on my website. I think it's $100 extra for the first 2 classes. So we got 45 minutes for one dog, 45 minutes for the other dog, okay? After the first 2 classes, we can almost always do 2 dogs within a class, okay? Or in some cases, the owner will like recall, it's hard to do 2 dogs, so you can either extend the time and or bring 1 dog, and like let's say you do like a 9-class program, and then another class you bring the separate dog. See what I'm saying? Or you can extend each class as needed, a half an hour for an extra little bit of money. Otherwise, if I train him and then you come back, you're paying another $2,000 or whatever to train the other dog if you wanted.
So you can teach an old dog new tricks?
Yes, I've trained dogs as old as 12 to 14. I'm always like, why are you starting now? But yes, you can. That's an old thing. And like for your lab, like you don't have to do the whole 9 yards. Like you could just do heel and then recall.
Heel and recall for her, I think, is going to be. I mean, if the heel solves a lot of the reactivity,
Yeah, it will.
then she's probably golden because she's incredibly biddable and easy to deal with, minus that aspect on the leash.
Yeah.
She listens. She is actually very good at getting distracted by treats on walk, even though I know that's probably not the best way to go about it, but
Sure.
it's the way that
It works.
it nips the barking so
Yeah.
that other people don't think you have a crazy dog.
Yeah. So, and like, if you're like, no, Jesse, we want to train this dog, we're going to do what we do with our other dog, I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm just letting you know as an option that it will
Yeah.
save you money.
I have an idea though. I think we would be interested in doing a board and train for him.
Okay.
And then for our lab, maybe we just do like a couple of classes and reinforce it
Sure.
after that.
So one thing that you could do is with the board and train, depending on how long it is, you do get follow-ups.
Yep.
You get 2 1-hour lessons with each week that we have your dog.
Okay.
So let's say you do a 2-week board and train.
Yeah.
You have 4 hours of follow-up.
Yeah.
Let's say, because we film, I film the first lesson of each thing that we teach, sit,
Okay.
stay down, come place heel.
Yep.
And then you get one video for the first week, and you get a separate video on the second week. The first week video is always the longest. It's almost always 2 to 3 hours long.
Okay.
It's a lot of information. As you go, as after you pick them up, I always tell clients, watch the videos, start with heel in place, build from there, okay? And then you're reinforcing the training. Your follow-ups, if anything doesn't click or if you're struggling with anything, you can have a follow-up. I help you close the gap there. If it's like, hey, Jesse, the videos are great, Scooby is awesome, and you want to use your classes to work with your lab, I don't have a problem. Okay? I just show up is what I tell people. Like, you paid for me, I'm here, what do you want to do? Okay? So that's also a possibility. I'm very flexible. All I care about is that you just let us know what you want to do, and I go, okay, not a problem, let's do it. With that in mind, there's separate systems, okay? There's some collars that are meant for one dog. There's a one-dog system, and there's collars meant for 2 dogs, okay? So if you're already thinking, yeah, we're kind of leaning towards training the lab in the future or something, again, you would save yourself money by investing in the collar meant for 2 dogs now, as opposed in the future, either having one remote to one dog, or then going, we need to upgrade our system now and buy a whole new system. They have the 2 dogs, okay? So you could do a remote and collar for him, and then you have a remote and collar for your next dog if you choose to do that route, okay? But then you just always have 2 remotes, 2 collars, as opposed to 1 remote, 2 collars, okay? The other thing is, and if this, we'll send you an email as well to clarify because there's a lot of information, is there's one particular unit that allows you to have 2 remotes, 2 collars, so both people have control over both dogs. What I've had happen in the past with couples is that one will have the remote, and then the other person needs the remote, and then they're like, can you correct so-and-so, right?
Yeah.
And it's inconsistent there. So I know we just sold one, I think all in with taxes, it's like $700-ish for 2 remotes and the 2 collars. But then also we have to send it to the company. We cannot set it up in-house. We have to send it to Doctra, and they pair it as a family system. And then then you have a family system, and it's usually about a 2 to 3 week turnaround. Okay, so if you decided you wanted to train him, board and train, and you send them January or whatever,
Yeah.
I can take care of the collar stuff for you. Like people buy it, I send it into Doctor for them, and then I present them with the system. And then you have it, and then when you're ready to use it for your other dog, you already have it, okay? So it's a little bit more pricier up front, but long term you save yourself money and hassle, okay? Or you can just do one remote collar for him, and then if you decide to do the lab, then you just get a different one. I don't care. I'm just letting you know that that is an option,
Okay.
okay? Other questions? For a board and train, what were you thinking for him?
Probably the 2 week for
Okay.
January.
That's fine. With the 2 week, again, you get 2 separate videos.
Yeah.
And by the second week, we're doing what we call foundational off leash, where we're already transitioning the dog to a long leash, and then you pick them up and you start to practice everything.
Okay.
The only drawback to a board and train is that all the work is done by us, so all the training is tied to us, and then we have to transfer everything to you. But that's why I film those sessions, because I want you to be able to understand how I got your dog from what he was to this. Okay, that's very important, so you understand how to carry it over. Okay, don't be surprised if in the video your dog looks stressed, anxious, panting, probably salivating. Okay, because it's going to be boot camp here. It's training all day as much as possible. Okay, remember e-collar is a stressor. Your dog is also out of his element. He's at a boarding facility, so all that just kind of piles up. It's all normal. Okay, once you get him and everything, and you start reinforcing everything, and he starts to get his how would you say, his normal life back, you're going to see all that stuff start to go away, okay? Because with the remote collar, in the beginning, it's a stressor because we're teaching all these things. We're providing consequence, right? Dog's stressed out. But they're not doing normal things like going to the park and stuff. Once you pick them up and you start living your normal life with him and using the tool in those contexts, a lot of that stuff goes away. Because now he gets more freedom. Now he gets to go to the restaurant with you. Now he gets to go and run around off leash at a park that doesn't need to be a dog park. Right? I don't need fences and walls.
Ideally, that would be like, the key is, gosh, if we could get him to go to like, you know.
There's 2 great memories with our lab where we were in, I think it was Kentucky, and we just let her out off the leash. There's no walls, no fences. She's running around the river. And it was awesome. And Indiana Dunes, we took off the leash. There's a beach.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We don't go to Montrose Beach anymore. I don't know if
The
you know
fencing.
that the fencing's down on the sides, and she just goes to the perimeter. So like, they're dogs that have instincts. They want to run free, but they need
Some kind of limitation, exactly. Yeah.
So,
And the remote collar that we use is fully waterproof, both the remote and the collar itself, so he can go swimming in it and all that stuff, no problem. But yeah, all of that is very realistic. Your case for me is like a mild case. It's not anything that I would call like severe or anything like that. Like I see this all the time, and even with what we're doing, like he's already starting to learn how to just turn off. He just needs more, reinforcement, but then also like some kind of disciplinary tool. Okay, but yeah, something I always call out because I don't want people to go like, oh my God, he looks terrified. I go, he's stressed, right? It's literally boot camp. Like we're not here to be nice to your dog, and we're not going to be mean to him, but we're here to apply the collar and get some training done so that when you pick him up, you're like, wow, this is life changing. Okay. But once he starts to like go back to his norm and go play and go to be off leash and experience life, it just balances everything out. Okay. Other questions? So for the booking process for the board and train, I'm going to be out of town Christmas to New Year's, and I know we're already booking for January now.
Yeah.
We only take 4 at a time. I know we already got one person signing up already for the end of January,
Okay.
and then we got another person coming in for board and train too. They're in the setting up process, so just heads up on that.
Okay.
We'll need vaccinations and a recent fecal.
Okay.
And then you can, Tina will most likely push you to Maria or Elizabeth, who are my admins here. Tina does my schedule. My admins here does the facility schedule. Okay. And then she'll let you know what we need. To hold your spot, it's half down. You can either pay in full or put half down. Okay. Once you put half down, you have your spot, and then you can put the other half once we come to your board and train, but we are paid in full by the time training starts, okay? The collar that I would recommend for him is the Dr. Black Edition, which is meant for a 70-pound dog and over. He looks to be about 60-ish, if not 70s.
Close to 70.
70? Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's right there. It's the best collar there is. It's the one that Georgia was on that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Fully waterproof system. And then I'll have my admin send you the information for the collar stuff. I know that collar is about $340-ish with tax all in. It lasts a long time. I had my previous system for almost 10 years. So again, it's an investment, but you take care of them, they last a very, very long time. If you decide to do the 2-collar system, family system, that's around the 700-ish, and we can send you an estimate so you have an understanding. And that would be the 2 remotes, 2 collars for both dogs. Okay, if you think to yourself you might work with your lab in the future. Okay, I would definitely say the collar thing you can kind of really think about it, because we won't need it until he starts his board and train. We sell them here ourselves, and then if you get it through us with the family system, I send it to doctor myself, so you don't have to pay for the shipping, and then handle that for you. And then when you come to pick them up, everything would just be given to you then. Okay, but the collar does have to be paid for before I can send it to Doctra, because they won't pair it until they see a receipt. Okay. Otherwise, if you just want to get this guy trained and just leave the lab be because she's 8 years, the only issue that you might come across is walking 2 dogs at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so then what you could.
I'm leaning towards training both, but we could talk about that.
Yeah, the other potential option is he's trained. Depending on how easy your lab is, you could again use your follow-ups for the lab. We can use her prong collar.
Yeah.
Okay, as to see how that works for you. Okay, again, I don't care. It's an 8-year-old dog, so I'm also just kind of like, it's an older dog. With remote collar training, an older dog, yes, it can be done, but they tend to get a little bit more stressed because they've gone 8 years of their life without ever experiencing anything like this. Whereas him, he's a young guy. He'll get stressed, but he's going to get over it a lot quicker.
Yeah, he just turned 2.
Yeah. So just heads up on that. Okay. Just stuff that I've seen throughout the years. They're perfectly fine. Like I said, they'll get over it once they get back to life. But yeah, that's also a possibility. Is depending on her temperament type, you could do prong with her, and then him, he's just remote collar trained or whatever. Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if she reacts well to just that. She seems like a minimally invasive will probably be enough for her.
Sure. But I would definitely recommend getting her to the 3mm at minimum. Okay. And then that, again, talk about it, mull it over. You have plenty of time. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Is everything making sense?
Yes.
Cool. So if you have any other questions you may have forgotten to ask, feel free to reach out, and then we'll get back to you. If it pertains to me and there's a little bit of a delay, I'll be out of town. And I definitely recommend, so on my YouTube channel, there's other consultations and then training videos that I've done, like trying to explain everything. But the Georgia one is a good one, just because I go in depth of explaining how all that stuff works. Okay.
So in the meantime, get them in a prom.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You know.
And any like groundwork we can start laying.
Not really. I mean, other than like with your prong collar and like this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it gets more complicated. So the reason why I like remote collar is it's simple. Prong collar is a great tool, but it does require a little bit of technical skill. So with the lab, it's minimal.
Yeah.
Like you won't have great recall because again, you have to remove the leash off that prong collar, but it'll still be at least better than nothing for the reactivity stuff. Okay. Anything else?
We'll just
Calm boy.
Here.
practice that at home a little bit or something.
Yeah. Also, it was a pleasure meeting you guys.
Yeah, you too.
If you need anything else, you let us know.
Yeah.
And then my admins will help get you situated, okay?